Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Tone Talk with Mark Uzansky and Dave Friedman. Tonight, we have an echo a little bit.
Yeah,
We did, but it went away.
Now it's gone.
Now it's gone. All right. Well, I want to introduce Billy Duffy from The Cult on our show tonight. We are honored to have you on the show. Really pleased to have you on. Thank you.
Nice
how
to
you
be
doing?
here.
Great. Dave, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. It's been
another day in a long year.
Another day in a long life.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. Thankfully, yeah. So I feel like today is an interesting day because today is two top secret releases from you, Billy, and also Dave. You had your top secret Gretsch guitar announcement this morning.
Yes, we teased it, yeah.
And then Dave, you guys teased some top secret new release coming as well.
Yeah, we did. Although it was a tease and some dealer violated it and
get out.
So yeah, of course. This is normal.
Yeah, you've been violated.
We have a release date and we somehow get violated. And of course the well-laid plans for we'll still go through with them, but the well-laid plans of a fun little release is ruined.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say any more about it because I'm still doing a little clip video release tomorrow. So
good. That's good.
So if you don't know, you might not.
No.
You know what? I do a show with you and I don't even freaking know what the hell's going on.
Yeah,
so that's how
weird. It's weird, isn't it? You have like for me, I have a kind of an internet world, and then there's like my real world, like my day-to-day mundane existence, and then there's this like a lot of people, I suppose, there's this like socially presented existence that people probably think you have. It's pretty funny, but I try and keep mine as close to the truth as I can. Don't want to debunk too many myths, but the guitar thing's good. Yeah, the guitar thing's good. Hopefully, I mean, it's not been made yet. We're kind of testing the water with a couple of prototypes. With it's sort of a development of the white Falcon, but making it a bit sort of smaller and more minimalist, and in a more compact package to keep the essential ingredients of the guitar, so you can get it in a somewhat smaller, easier to handle package. Because as my lead singer, Mr. Asprey, says, that is a man's guitar. You get hold of a Gretsch White Falcon and put it through a Marshall stack, and you really need to man up, because it's definitely quite a visceral experience.
It's a wild ride.
Yeah, it's a lot different playing it in a pub at about 2 watts. You get that thing can really take off. So it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot of fun though. And Gretsch been great. I have a great relationship with them, and they're very professional, easy to work with. So we'll see. Hopefully it'll work out. People will like it. I dig it.
I'm sure they will. So how'd you gravitate to playing a White Falcon in the first place?
Very good question, and Jermaine. After in England, after punk rock ended, which for most of us was kind of when the Pistols broke up. So by the end of '78, a lot of people who were like fans of it were like, it's kind of done now. We were all starting to look. I consider my generation as kind of being the fans of punk rock, amongst other things. We're the kids who were in the audience watching the Pistols and the Clash and the Damned and the Banshees and then Generation X. My kind of generation saw that, didn't want to copy it, but was inspired by it, And so within sort of 3 or 4 years of seeing that kind of music, and then that music obviously turned us on to the bands that influenced the punk bands. So then we got into the MC5, the Stooges, the Dolls. If we weren't already into them, Alice Cooper, all the kind of, punk rock approved American bands that didn't sell a lot of records. The Doors were okay too. I think what I'm getting at is that I think I didn't want to try and be a copy of a punk band. I wanted to find my own thing, and I think a lot of other guitar players did. And I just gravitated towards a Gretsch through happenstance more than anything else. There was a little bit of a rockabilly revival around 1980 in London. It became a thing called psychobilly, which was kind of punk rock, rockabilly fusion. The Stray Cats came over and kind of blew up in England. And obviously the Gretsch thing just seemed to be something that was a bit of a departure for what most of the punk bands used, which were usually Les Pauls, Telecasters, for the most part. If you look at most punk bands, it was a Les Paul or a Telecaster kind of. And that was it. I'd seen White Falcons, Neil Young had some memorable pictures, Malcolm Young. I'm trying to think who else we had. Sylvain and the New York Dolls had a White Falcon. And that was pretty exciting too. So, you know, I always thought it was kind of a great mythical guitar. And I'm trying to think when I switched, I mostly used Les Pauls and Les Paul Juniors, trying to be, you know, a bit of a Johnny Thunders wannabe or a Steve Jones wannabe. And eventually, I joined the band. I was working in London and I joined the band, and the band was called Theatre of Hate. And the lead singer used the Gretsch, a single anniversary. It's kind of bizarre guitar where the pickup's at the neck, then there's no bridge pickup. And he just said to me when they were kind of auditioning me, they said, so I showed up with the Les Paul Jr. and they said, so like, if you get the gig with the band, what would you get? And I said, well, I'd get a Gretsch White Falcon probably if I got like a real job in a real band who went on tour and, you know, and so it came to pass. I got the job. I took all my savings and bought a White Falcon in London in 1981. And I've been so known with them ever since.
Do you still have that guitar?
No, I'm not very sentimental.
Okay, that's good.
Well, I had to trade up. A lot of times I had to trade up because I wasn't awash with money. And they were very expensive. Well, they still are very expensive guitars, even back then. It took all my savings, the huge sum of £800 sterling, to buy one, and I had to trade one to get a different one. I always wanted a single cutaway one, and I could never find one initially, so I had to have the double cutaway one, and I got the absolute worst model, which was stereo, and the stereo wasn't split between both pickups. It was split. Each pickup was split between treble and bass, which I've come to understand was for country picking. So you can put kind of some sort of tight reverb on the bottom strings and a different kind of delay or reverb on the high strings. And you had to have a stereo cable or guitar cord or whatever you call it. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So that was the first one I had. And I just went through a series of them and eventually got a mid-70s Baldwin era, which was not their finest hour in terms of manufacture, but I always got along with it. I liked the neck, I liked the tremolo, and I hated the pickup. So the first thing I did when I got that guitar and the cult got going, I'd met Seymour Stein's son when I was in Los Angeles the first time, and he kind of befriended the band, and he took me up to meet his dad up in Santa Barbara. And he said, well, if you want to pick up for a Gretsch, I'll make you one. And he made me one in 1986. And that resolved to me the worst issue with that mid-70s Falcon. Because everything else about it's great. Stays in tune pretty good. The neck, as I say, the neck's got a good feel to it. The tremolo's nice. Just the pickups were just so underpowered that I resolved that. And that was it, basically.
So what kind of pickup was it?
The one, it was a pickup that ended in the bin, the one that was in it. And he specially wound something for me. I think I sent him a record. He said, send me a recording. We were in the studio, and Dave, you'll want to talk about this later, I think, maybe, doing the first version of the Electric album. And I think somebody had a Telecaster with a humbucker in it. And I sort of sent him a recording of that. And I said, I kind of want it to sound Gretschy, but I want it to have I want it to have the percussion of a Les Paul on the bottom end, but I still wanted to keep the chime. And the closest approximation of all that I could get was kind of a telly with a humbucker in the bridge somebody had done. So, and he made me one on that. And then what Gretsch would call reverse engineered, which is they've taken that old pickup from the 80s, and that's what's in all my signature guitars. They basically dismantled it, analyzed it, and all my signature guitars that I'm lucky enough to still sell, surprisingly, we sell a lot, they just have that copy of that pickup in it.
That's great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's it. And then, you know, I mean, I've still used Les Pauls. I'm just more son because the biggest, when we broke through as a band, particularly in the UK and Canada, was with the song She Saw Sanctuary. And obviously there was a video for that, and I have the white guitar, and I kind of became synonymous with that guitar. But I've always used Les Pauls as well, in equal measure, you know, because they do different things.
Right. You mean equal measure in live and in the studio?
Yeah. I did do we did an album called Love. The first album was called Dreamtime, and it never came out in America. It came out in like Canada and Japan and a few places. And I only used the Falcon on that. And then on the Love album, pretty much was 99% White Falcon. But by the time we got to electric, I started wanting to get some different textures and sounds, and started bringing in. Ian had a Telecaster that I used, and he'd bought some kind of weird Vox 12 string teardrop. They appeared in London. There was some story that they'd been found in a warehouse. And so in the mid 80s, all these Voxes, Susie Sue from the Banshees had one, and suddenly everybody was playing a Vox teardrop. Apparently they'd been found in boxes in parts and reassembled, and Ian got one that was in a video, and I used that a little bit. You know, just like you do. A few albums in, you just start reaching for different tools to try and explore different sounds.
Awesome.
Right. I don't know. I lost track. You asked a couple things I was gonna. So yeah, you know. So I did bring this up when we were private before, but there was a big departure. So you did a Love record, which was the first real U.S. release.
It was the first US release,
and it definitely had an alternative / I don't know what you want to call it exactly, art house something sound
brilliance.
to it. Brilliance, actually, because it is an amazing record. And then, you know, stuff radically changed when you got to electric, which was also a great record.
Well, thank you. It did. There's a few reasons why. They're fairly, you know, some of them are pragmatic in that, you know, we did the Love album, and we then went on tour and toured the world and went around America and got exposed to more of a rock-based culture. You know, in the UK, there was still an enormous hangover from punk rock, and there was a bit of kind of a lot of negativity against rock, unless you were like a metal band, and that was like a subcultural thing. That was a world in of its own. You know, if you were like in the quote unquote mainstream of modern current guitar bands, you know, guitar solos weren't allowed. There was lots of rules and regulations kind of about what you should and shouldn't do in terms of creatively. And one of the things that used to annoy me in Ian was that kind of it seemed to be run out of about 3 pubs in London, and a little clique of journalists who got very powerful would make and break bands. And you know, they had like anything else, you know, they had their artists that they loved who could never do any wrong. And if you were a band that didn't fit, or you were from the provinces, or considered, you know, backwards because you were from the north of England or something, and you weren't in the club, then you would get a lot of negativity. So that was one of the things I think that pushed us towards the going like hard on the psychedelia. Ian grew his hair, and you know, the sound was just happenstance. It was me trying to get the band more and more leaning in a heavier rock direction, trying to kind of bring some of my, like the Stooges and stuff like that into the Cult. Bearing in mind we'd had a hit with She Sells Sanctuary, which was sort of like a dance song with like that kind of Celtic, I don't know what that riff style is, I still don't know, but whatever it was, I came up with it. And we'd had a hit with that, so basically everybody said, oh, I don't know what you're doing, but do more of it, you know, off you go. And we went in the studio, and we had such a great time doing that album. It was a lot of fun. And so that album was great. Circumstances led us to use Big Country's drummer as a session. Our drummer we'd had, unfortunately, wasn't really capable of doing the record, although he did play on She Sells Sanctuary. And ironically, Mark Brzezicki, the drummer from Big Country, is in the video, but he didn't play on the song. That's the kind of weird stuff that happens around the Cult. And there's another long, boring story about that I won't go into. But suffice it to say, the only song on the Love album that Mark Brzezicki didn't play on, he's in the video for. Well, put it this way, the drummer was temporarily incarcerated when we were shooting the video. So we had to borrow another drummer who happened to be driving through that time. Anyway, so basically we do that album. We had 3 hits in England. We tour around. We come to America. We're doing a lot of. At that time in the United States, there was a big college radio, was what would support bands like the Cult, and you know all of the post-punk indie bands, all of them, everybody. It was college radio. Whatever band you can think of from sort of 1979 onwards to like 1984. It was college radio supported us primarily in America, and obviously Canada had kind of an Anglophile thing, and that's what we got our initial support with. And then we just started to break through to more mainstream rock stations a little bit. I remember in Seattle, we went and we did our only radio interview with a proper American like rock DJ on a rock station. And me and Ian go in there and the guy's talking normally. And then the minute we go live, his voice changes. He becomes this entirely new person, starts talking like in platitudes and called us The Cure. So that was my first experience of like, you know, you guys are great. I love The Cure. You're the best. And it was just like, what? So it was a little bit of an inauspicious start, but we did do pretty well in Seattle out of that actually later. But anyway, to get to the point of your story, we do all that. We go back to England, and we're not stupid. We use the same producer, and we've written a load of new songs, but they're getting a bit more rock, leaning towards rock. And we try and record a follow-up album, and for a bunch of different reasons, it didn't work out. So we spent, and being us, we were too dumb to quit. We recorded the whole album, we mixed the whole album, and then went, I don't think it's right. And so what basically happened was we'd been exposed to Rick Rubin's work with particularly a song called Cookie Puss by the Beastie Boys, by a DJ friend of ours in Toronto called Chris Shepherd, who sadly passed away, I believe. And he turned me and Ian onto this thing where you've got these beats, but like basically AC/DC riffs, but it's kind of, and then it's like whatever the Beastie Boys thing was at that time. And we were like, that sounds interesting. And then, of course, the Run DMC thing with Rick and Aerosmith. So we made a connection and met him. And basically, to cut a long story short, Rick agreed to remix our album that we'd recorded in England that we weren't happy with. But he said he wanted us to cut one song with him from the ground up. So we go to New York to cut one song. So it's all rented equipment. We just go thinking we're going for like a week. We rent everything, drums, guitars, everything. And then we start recording, and it's so fundamentally different. We decide to do the whole album again. And we did it in 19 days in New York.
Wow.
Right around Christmas time of 1986 into 1987. And we worked every day. And it was Rick and George Draculius. And I think it was Rick's first album where he actually used the live drums. We recorded it at Electric Ladyland, but I don't think that's where the title of the album came from. and we recorded it. And basically, and we had Andy Wallace engineered it, who's, you know, now would want your firstborn to mix one of your albums. He recorded it and mixed it for us on the same desk. We did it all, and it was like a method thing. 24 tracks. What you see is what you get. What you hear is what you get. 2 guitar tracks, tambourine. You know, it was very minimalist. And what Rick did, and I've always used the quote to finish. Rick said, "I didn't really produce the Cult in so much as I reduced them." We'd made an album that was overblown and had too many layers and overcompensation for not really working enough on the structure of the songs. And Rick basically took everything down to its very barest fundamental rock bones and kind of said to me and Ian, "You like early Aerosmith, you like AC/DC, you like early Led Zeppelin." I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "So cool, let's make a record." You know, and that was essentially what happened. And that's how we did it. We just kind of gutted it out. You know, our gut was like, what we'd done wasn't right. Subsequently, that came out. It was called the Manor Sessions, and then it subsequently got released as Peace, I think. It's like a rare, but the actual Electric album first version was completely finished, recorded and mixed, and it has many of the same songs, just the more, I guess, British indie versions. Some people like it. I don't hate it. It has some good qualities. It's just that I think the Rick thing was important in our history to kind of change the trajectory of where the Cult was going in the longer term, I think.
Yeah, that was a great. I remember distinctly when that came out, and it was just a great floor stomping, solid meat and potatoes rock riff record. You know, it's just,
we were aiming for meat and 2 veg, so we did all right.
Well, then, you went on tour. You were on tour on that record with Billy Idol.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
And because I saw it.
Oh yeah, you were at that, the Whiplash Smile tour.
Yeah, Whiplash Smile tour. Yes, I saw in whatever it was, 87 probably, or late 86 or something, right?
Yeah, it was 87. It was summer of 87.
Yeah, I saw it in at a shed in Detroit, I think. Is that where I saw it? Yeah, that would have been where I saw it.
Good time. It was a really fun tour. We had a great time. It was a lot of fun.
It was great. And then Matt Sorum was playing drums.
No, he wasn't. You were hallucinating. No? It was Les Warner. Matt Sorum joined us for Sonic Temple, the next album. Yep, he wasn't. Unless you saw us with Metallica, and then Matt Sorum was in the band, and that was 89.
No, I wouldn't have seen that.
If it was with Whiplash Smile, then it wasn't Matt.
My mistake then.
It's okay. It's not that I do know.
You did have 2 guitar players, I remember. You and someone else.
1.5.
1.5. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And what we did was our bass player originally, Jamie, just switched back to his original instrument, which was always guitar, because he gave up the guitar to be the bass player in the Death Cult, which became the Cult, same band. And then we decided that we wanted to add another guy. But I kind of had still an idea of how I wanted the band to look. So basically we got a bass player in called Haggis, who played in Zodiac Mind Warp. And his whole thing was just, I don't want to ever move more than 18 inches from the kick drum. And I will never do anything other than bang my head. And he just played eighth notes. And so essentially the Cult front line was still, you know, Jamie, Ian and me. And Haggis just locked into the drums and just headbanged and did his thing. And, you know.
I remember that tour.
It was a fun time. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was. I remember that distinctly. It was very locked in and sounded amazing.
It was, yeah, we was a long, and then of course after that we went back around on our own, and we had the same summer, towards the end of the summer, we had a little up and coming band who did quite well called Guns N' Roses open for us as our special guests. Ian found them. He said, "There's this band I found in LA called Guns N' Roses, and they're playing in London. You've got to go and see them," because we were still living in England at that point. So I tried to go down the marquee and I couldn't get in. to see this band, because Ian said, I think they should play with us. They're really good. They're like a really good rock band, and they're the real deal. And you know, yes, they were, and yes, they are. And that was a good. So that summer was pretty bonkers, I can tell you. You know, going on tour with Billy Idol and you know, and Steve Stevens and the guys, and then with all the Guns guys, we had you know, that was that was definite piracy on the high seas.
I bet.
That's
Hey, I got to
great.
jump over to a couple of super chats, Dave.
Yeah.
Before I miss them. From Mike Corsack, thanks for the super chat. He says,
Oh, okay.
How did Billy become such a fan of Boss pedals?
I inherited them. I didn't actually have any pedals when the Death Cult started, which I say the Death Cult just because there's people out there go, well, you were called the Death Cult for 9 months before. It's the same band. We were called the Death Cult and we stopped calling ourselves, we took the death off the name, became the Cult. But essentially, when Jamie joined the band, I told you, I just said, Jamie, he gave up the guitar and he gave me his pedals. He said, I don't think I'll be needing these anymore. Because in the band I was in before, Theatre of Hate, I don't think I used pedals. I used reverb. I had a Fender Twin and a Gretsch, and I might have used an MXR overdrive that was horrible. And so Jamie gave me a couple of pedals and I just started using them. They were mostly Boss pedals. And I just kind of grew to love their dependability and reliability and the way they perform like a Japanese automobile. You know, they never let you down, and you can get what you need from them anywhere in the world. You know, there was a sort of a pragmatic element, but they also sounded great. You know, I still love the DM2. I still use Boss pedals for the most part.
You do.
You know, there's so many boutique pedals now. I don't think people understand. If you kind of like, if you've been around like I have, there were no boutique amps. There were no boutique pedals. There weren't guys in sheds making this amazing stuff.
No.
There was just what manufacturers gave you. And out of those, some of it was crap and some of it was good.
Yeah, you had Boss pedals, or you had Ibanez pedals and MXR pedals, and that's it.
That was it. And then there was just the ancient pedals that the rock gods used. That were in, you know, in second-hand shops and buried in people's cupboards, you know, and there was none of that. You just kind of had to do, and then the 80s that just started. That's when we started learning about amp modification, and you know, you can make them sound better than what Reginald did in Milton Keynes, and you know, it was quite a sharp learning curve with the whole thing in the 80s. You know, coming to the States. With Seymour Duncan with the pedals and with the pickups, and you know, it was a thing.
Yeah,
right. That's cool.
And also, hold on. And going on that tour, remember? So I show up on that electric tour. So we're going out. When we play in England, and great, we sell out like 30 shows, and everything's fine and dandy, and rock's having a big comeback, and got huge, and you know, we were right on the forefront of that return to kind of cool rock finally, and all that was great, except I go out there and I'm trying to play a White Falcon. We've got Steve Stevens shredding. The next tour I go on is Slash,
right?
Like, so I was like, you know, I'm having a little trouble with this Falcon. It's like trying to drive an SUV around a racetrack with race cars. You know, it's just no matter what you do, an SUV is still an SUV. You know what I mean? And it has a high center of gravity. So I had to start kind of leaning back onto the Les Pauls a little bit. And the music on electric was all recorded with Les Pauls. There's not any, people like to think there's a Gretsch on there, and I hate to disabuse them. There isn't. It was done with 2 rented Les Pauls and a bunch of rented Marshalls, of which we selected the best 2 out of 10 rentals and a cabinet. And that is the whole of the electric album is basically those instruments. From my perspective, that was it. There was no.
Great.
Yeah.
Great info, by the way. Mike Corsick also has another one. Dave, this is for you. Have you heard of it or have an opinion of the Bill M mod for a Blues Junior?
I don't even know what it is.
Okay. Yeah. I've not heard of it.
Sorry.
Yep. Sorry. I couldn't answer it. We've got another one from Night Mission. Billy, your guitar playing in She Sells Sanctuary is still to this day the most incredible, unique, badass playing.
I can't argue with that. I can fully support that sentiment. Thank you very much.
That's great. L. Scott Music. The Cult is the only big band I've seen live twice, once in Santa Barbara, once at Santa Barbara Bowl, and once in Orange County when a new guy named Lenny Kravitz opened for them. That one got me laid.
And me.
Oh, awesome. And a new guy, Lenny Kravitz. He's done
Yeah,
pretty
it was
well.
up. Well, actually, yeah, we had the same management, and it was the tour after Sonic Temple. It was a tour of ours on an album called Ceremony, which was actually quite an extensive, large-scale tour due to the cumulative success of our previous album. Ceremony didn't do as well as Sonic Temple. That was our first little, the bit in the story where everything's going on the up, and then suddenly, you know, who knows? It happens to everybody usually. But the tour was fantastic. And then Lenny, we had the same management. So Lenny was at that point huge in Europe, and we would have had to open for him over there. But in America, he hadn't cracked it yet, really. So it was a nice little package. It worked great. Great tour. I had tons of fun on that tour.
What year was that?
It was late 1991. I believe.
Music was
I think, or
changing.
maybe 91 into 92.
Yeah, music was changing.
Music started to change.
It was, yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Yep.
Things were on the change. We were still playing arenas and had long hair, and you know, down in the, you know, in the little clubs in LA, things were changing. Bands were appearing. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you had Nirvana.
Yeah. I remember all that grunge thing, because a lot. If you've seen that like Pearl Jam movie, you know, they do a thing. We were friends with them when they were Mother Love Bone, and I remember going to see him in Toronto with Ian, and Ian got really friendly with their singer that died, Andrew Wood. And, you know, if you see that Pearl Jam movie, you know, there's a whole thing of them trying to get into the Cult gig in Seattle. And, you know, obviously, you know, you guys know I'm good friends with Jerry, and he used to played with him a fair bit. And he told me how kind of Jerry was more the rock guy, and Lane was turning Jerry on to like the Cult and bands that were more from the alternative. And that was kind of the Alice in Chains kind of fusion was that Lane brought in. He was into that kind of more indie stuff from England that was still, and that was one of the things I thought that made the Cult, probably, if I could talk about my band in the third person, out of all the British bands that came over that weren't out and out rock, a la Def Leppard, who were a rock, pop, metal band, we were the most rock and roll of all the indie bands, of the Bunnymen, the Furs. I don't mean that in a judgmental way, because I love all of those bands. I'm just saying we were the most hard rock. Ian had that voice. I'd grown up trying to play rock guitar before punk, and it was just natural for us, for our songwriting, to evolve down that road, particularly as we started getting popular in North America. You know, it was harder for us to keep the angular, punky, you know, our music just evolved and went down that road. It wasn't difficult for us. It was actually natural. People thought it was like some kind of fake thing. I mean, Ian lived in North America for 6 years when he was a teenager. So he grew up on the border between America and Canada in Hamilton, Ontario. So he had a North American high school upbringing. So he had exposure to FM radio, which I never had. You know, it didn't exist in the UK. You know, there wasn't that type of radio in England. So, you know, that type of music was in our DNA, but also a huge part of it for me was punk rock, which just happened when I left high school. So I was literally right there circumstantially in Manchester when the punk thing happened. So those two things together, you know, is kind of what it went into the Cult's DNA, and it's still there to this day. You never lose that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful fusion of all those influences. which I think is great because
And you can hear it.
you can hear it.
We try. It's difficult. There aren't that many. I could be wrong, but they're not. A lot of the great bands that came out of the UK in the 80s, none of them were quite as bluesy. I mean, there was not a lot of blues in their makeup, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Their music was amazing, but it wasn't blues. We had more of the blues rock and roll thing going on, and we just ran with it,
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
So we had Bob Rock on the show
yeah,
a while back. How did you end up meeting Bob Rock, and how did that come about for the Sonic Temple album?
Well, that was going back to probably the Whiplash Smile tour, or possibly us with Guns N' Roses. I when in Vancouver in the 80s, I used to find myself somehow magnetically drawn to a strip club pub. And I ran into this guy who became my drinking buddy called Laird Doyle, who turned out to be Bob Rock's tech. And Bob Rock was a guy I'd never heard of. But he said, "Oh, my boss, Bob, he's playing in this band. They're playing the big thing you're playing. They're playing it tonight. You're playing it tomorrow. He wants to meet you." And so, having had a few beers, I went down in some ridiculous outfit. And I've seen some photos of it. And I met Bob and his band. It was a band called Rock and Hide, which was essentially, I'd never heard of them. They're like a Canadian band. And really what it was they were the Payolas, which was a Canadian punk band. Mm-hmm. Right. And they split up, reformed, and changed their name to the primary members, Bob and Paul Hyde. Anyway, so that was it. And I met him, and we just chatted and got along great. And he was saying how he'd started getting into engineering and was working with Bruce Fairbairn at a studio called Little Mountain. Next thing I hear, I go back to, so that's great night, love Bob, nice guy, had fun, whatever. A few months later, I hear that Kingdom Come album on the radio, which, you got to put it into its, you have to put Kingdom Come, and Dave's laughing because he probably knows all of the band guys.
No, I'm sort of laughing. I'm sort of remembering what Bob said about the Kingdom Come thing.
Well, I'm sure everybody, anyway, whatever. I'm not going to, all that mattered was I liked the sounds.
It sounded huge.
Record.
Yeah.
The sound was huge, and huge was what I wanted for the cult. Because electric was great, but I wanted something a bit more, almost grandiose. I thought electric was brilliant, like an early AC/DC album. It was honest and real, but a bit, I struggled because, to be honest, I went into that session as a guy who played a white Falcon with a few effects pedals through a Roland JC 120 chorus and a Marshall, and I had this whole Love Sanctuary sound, and I came out of it, and Rick was like, "There's a Les Paul, there's a Marshall, off you go." And I had to rewrite all the stuff on the spot. It was traumatic, like really to drop everything I'd built up. But I thought it was for the greater good of the band. I got caught up in the vibe of making that electric album, which in retrospect was the correct thing to do. Mm-hmm. So, but with Bob, I just felt, I chatted with Bob, and I think he might have said to me, like, if I was doing a record with you, I'd want to take the essence of the electric album, but bring back some of the stuff from the Love album that might got a bit left behind. That's how we ended up with, I mean, I suggested using Bob. He had no track record other than the Kingdom Come record and engineering on. I don't know what Bruce Fairbairn had done, but I think it could have been Bryan Adams, Bon Jovi. I don't know, but it was that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And in full credit to Ian Asprey, he went, "If you feel strongly enough about it, we should go for it." So, that was that open-mindedness rather than, no, we have to use Rick Rubin again, or we have to use a big rock. We took a chance on Bob, because it was a gamble. He had Kingdom Come, but that was it. And then, we had a great time making the album in 1988, I believe, up in Vancouver, and it was a good record for us,
Yeah.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Of its time, you know, it was big, and it's still, you know, we threw the kitchen sink at that one, 2 kitchen sinks, you know, it was, but all manner of technology going and stuff. It was great.
Do you remember
what technology there was at the time?
Oh yeah, there was definitely, there was all sorts going on. It was marvelous.
You remember
the good
guitars
old days.
Yeah, the good old days before digital.
Yeah.
Do you remember the amps and guitars that you used on that album to record?
Yeah, I mean, it was the same sort of the same essential go-to package that I always would do. I used my Marshalls that have been modified. I had these JCMA. This was a great one. So we get money. The Cult finally makes some money after the Love album. We're going to go on tour and do electric, and Dave's going to come and see us in Detroit and hallucinate that he sees Matt Sorum on stage.
Yeah, well, okay.
2 years before he joined the band, but he's hallucinating Matt Sorum. So we just go to Marshall and we just buy all new amps, everything. We buy a whole back line and we flight case it all. And that was it. There was we just like, well, all right, we need 2 of those heads, 2 of those, 4 of those cabs. It was like all those horrible Marshalls with the big logo and the black. Ugh. And that's what, I didn't know any better. I mean, it was, I didn't know. We were a club band, right. And then we became a theatre band. And then we became kind of an arena shed band fairly quickly. And I just tried to have to adapt, and we made it up as best we could going along. It was just kind of adapt and survive and observe other bands and people who you respected and learn from them, how they did it, how they did their things,
Yep. I'm going to jump over to a couple more super chats that we have here.
All right.
Patrick Miller, thank you for the super chat. For all of you, what are your greatest guitar tones you've ever heard in person? Doesn't have to be a live show. And what was the gear you used? Mine is Steve Stevens, Gilmore, and Dimebag. What's yours, Billy? Greatest tones you've heard live?
Wow, that's a good one. It's an interesting one, that tone. I think that's really where it's at. At the end of the day, that's a very, off the top of my head, I did a gig where I was lucky enough to play with Sammy Hagar and Ronnie Montrose before Ronnie Montrose died. And I was lucky enough to play a couple of early Montrose tunes with those 2 guys on stage. And that was really brilliant. And that was a pretty good tone. And I had a good chat with him. Ronnie Montrose got a pretty good sound. I've done a lot of gigs with Steve Stevens, and I would say that, in all honesty, I would say Steve and Jerry Cantrell get great tones. Stevens, Jerry Cantrell, and Dave's nodding. Yeah.
They always got good tones.
but they always before me. Get good tones, right. And they get better tones now. But those guys, I used to like what Mick Ralphs did with Bad Company. I know he wasn't the technically greatest guitar hero, but Mick Ralphs in Bad Company and Mott the Hoople, I really love. I saw Mott the Hoople when they reformed in 2010. They did 5 nights in London, and I went specially to see that. And he's still got this ginormously fat, he probably had 3 too many Jack and Cokes, but his tone was just this enormously thick rock. I mean, there's loads of people. I'm completely missing a billion guys. It's just today that's what sprung into my head. Mick Ronson is obviously somebody who I would say always got pretty interesting guitar sounds that were expressive. I think that's the key to me, is I like music and the tonality conveys an emotion, and that's what's always appealed to me about music. I can admire somebody's technical ability, but when I was 14 years of age, sitting at home in my bedroom practicing guitar scales was the last thing I had on my mind. You know what I mean? So I was never going to be the fastest gunslinger in town.
Right.
So, there was too many girls to chase. So I did what I needed to do to get by. on the guitar, and works on, you know, what haircut and all that stuff. But it's a great question, because to me, it's great that the guy asked that about tone, because to me, that's really it. I think rock and roll music is music, and I differentiate like rock and metal. To me, metal is brilliant, but it's from the waist up. It's music that affects you in a cerebral kind of, and rock and roll really gets you from the waist down. Or if it's good, it should.
Right.
You know, and the tonality connects me emotionally with it. And that's what I like. I mean, Joe Bonamassa, I was chatting to a mate the other day. I heard something that Joe Bonamassa did, and fantastic guitar tone.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, he's got great tone too.
We're lucky. There's guys making great amps now.
Exactly.
You can go and buy them.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that reminds me of our sponsor, I should mention, Sweetwater. Guys, check out Sweetwater. You can check out
go buy something from them.
Yeah.
And a multitude of products, all kinds of a good amp, a Gretsch White Falcon you can get. You know, so check out, we have a link down below the video you guys are watching. So if you click on that, it gives us a little kickback to the show. So let me get to another super chat. More guitars.
Wait, let me answer that question too, though.
Oh, sure, go for
it. Yeah, go.
So,
yeah.
It's funny. I grew up mostly, you know, in childhood would be, you know, mostly in the 80s. So for me, you know, of course, Eddie Van Halen, seeing him live in 1984, amazing guitar tone.
Yeah.
AC/DC always a great loud guitar tone.
Loud.
Oh, really loud. You know, always been good. But I mean, I could go down the list. It's not just three or something, you know, I can go down the list. I mean, I remember seeing Warren DeMartini play, you know, with his band Rat in the 80s with these old Marshalls, and they were amazing. Sounded amazing. Jerry's tone, like you said, Steve Stevens also. Even Ty Tabor over the years and King's X. Amazing sounds, interesting sounds, different. Especially like the Gretchen record of Ty King's X, it's just amazing guitar tone, I think. But unique. I like unique. I mean, you know, the interesting thing about that time is that was just before you could buy this stuff, right? This is before you could buy the amps with gain and this and that. So people were coming up with ways to boost them and preamp them and do things to them that were kind of unique. I mean, I guess that started way back with like Ritchie Blackmore using a tape machine into his Marshall Major. You know, I remember George Lynch telling me a story where he was in the studio recording one of their records, and he had a little tiny Porta studio, right? So he would plug into it and take the out and feed it into the front of his Marshall. And they would hide the Porta studio under the console because they didn't want anyone seeing it, because it was preamping the front of the amp, boosting it or pushing it. But all that led to unique tones, which I find interesting. And I think in some ways that's a little lacking today because you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So at that point, does everything become a little more homogeneous? I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting thought.
Yeah, you certainly had to work a lot harder in the 80s to find that. I mean, I remember, there's a lot of different tricks and different, and also, you know, all amps, you have to find a good one. They weren't all the same. You know, you couldn't. You know, they were good Marshalls. I mean, I remember going in to see. I popped in to see Van Halen because I've become quite friendly with Sammy, and I went in to see them rehearsing somewhere, and that, you know, he literally had a wall of Marshall heads that had all been modified. You know, that was I think the big trick in the 80s was to get amps modified by, you know, Jedis in their back sheds. And I still have one. It was done by a guy called Harry Colby in New York.
Yeah.
There was a Marshall, but whatever he did with the, you know, he did something with the power section So that, because what I felt had happened with Marshalls was, in order to try and get more overdrive, they just cheapened out on the actual quality of the components, and you were starting getting this like sizzly front end, what I call the guitar center tone, which is all sizzle. It's just like sizzling bacon.
Yes.
In reality, you think it sounds good when you're playing it, but you actually turn it up and it just diminishes. And so he kind of worked on the power section of the amp so that it really gave some actual meat to the sound. But he also welded a little silicon box with his little secret ingredient.
Secrets in it, yeah.
Yeah, you probably know about this.
I know. Well, I've worked on your amp.
Yeah, you've seen. So he made this little, so that, they all had their tricks. And then eventually from that, I guess, I remember Soldano. Was a thing for a minute, and various the guy up in Vancouver who started making amps and working with AC/DC, Wizard, and blah blah blah. So maybe there's a homogenization. I mean, there's also that. In addition to that thought, in terms of, when I started playing and when I saw the Sex Pistols, for example, just to give it some perspective, when I saw the Sex Pistols play, Jim Morrison had only been dead 5 years. Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix has only been dead maybe 6, something like that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like time, the amount of musical change. So we've had a long period now for kind of music to hybridize, and it's very difficult. I mean, we've got 40, 50 years of like rock history. When I started, we only had, and then there was guys before me who, they grew up listening to the Shadows, and, they listened to that kind of music, and then the Beatles, and, I learned off the guys who learned from them. So I listened to the rock guys, late 60s, the British blues rock, and that then again influenced, rock music as it became in the 70s,
Yeah. Yeah,
you mentioned Harry Colby and modifying your amp. So Miko Thompson, make sure I got his name right. He sent me on Facebook. He sent me a picture of an amp that he owns that used to be owned by you.
It could be. I've had a lot of amps. I can't confirm or deny it in this situation, but I will say I had a lot of amps over the years.
He said it was confirmed by somebody that Harry Colby had modded it.
It could be. It could be true. I had a lot of amps. I had these original ones that I bought, and of which I've only got one now. I sold a couple like a year or so ago, but I did have another bunch of amps, and But I don't hold on to gear for a long time. Really, it kind of passes through, and I'm not really. I try not to be a hoarder.
I like that. No, and are you constantly getting new gear? Have you tried new gear, or you just hold on to like one or few things?
On the contrary, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's like Boss pedals. Although I will say, I have a weakness for overdrives. I have like I will. I have to know. Do I still possess, to me, the best overdrive pedal ever made? That's my one thing, is the sweetest harmonic overdrive.
You and tons of guitar players.
All guitar players. That's the one pedal that
I want the one boost pedal that does something extra special.
Yeah, I want that. That's what we all want.
Is there
the betterer, the pedal that makes it sound betterer?
Right. The one you keep always on that makes you better. Exactly.
Yeah, it just makes you betterer.
And any particular ones that you like that you can share?
Well, I mean, I'm obviously a fan of. I use my main one is the Clon reissue. The T, was it D Clon reissue T?
Oh, the red one.
Yeah, the red one.
Yeah, KOT or whatever. Or something.
I've not. Yeah. I've tried others. I have prior to getting those, of which I do it like a boxing match. I'll put them head to head, and if it can beat that, it's like a knockout competition, but nothing yet to me has beaten that pedal for my. And of course I found that because Bob Rock had an original Klon Centaur now worth, $4 million, and because Bob has all the gear, because that's what I've learned. You go in a studio with a producer like Bob, or guys who can play a little bit. They have a habit of collecting all the gear that sounds good.
Yeah.
And like Bob said, if an amp doesn't do a job that's good, it's just taking up space. It's a doorstop.
Bob said, he goes, I don't collect gear, I collect sounds.
Yeah.
And he goes, if it's the combination to get this sound, that's what I'm buying.
Yeah. I've known Bob, all since 88, or 87, in fact. So, yeah, he's got some great stuff. And, I've had the opportunity. I have my live thing and I have my go-to setup. I do that. And then, when we go in to make records, I have more fun and experiment and try and get different sort of inspirations from different guitars and amps and sounds and stuff,
Sure.
Let me jump over to some more super chats. We got a bunch of them. More guitars. Thank you for the super chat. Killer show again. Thank you. Dave, I use your Wildwood Small Box 50 live, and I just got a Fryette power station along with your mic No Mo to go to front of house. Do I go from Small Box 50 to the mic No Mo, which goes to front of house, then to the power station?
You can do that. That works fine. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Let me jump ahead.
I don't know if you really need the power station with the amp, but
I was gonna say, yeah. Yeah, there was a Facebook post that I had commented also. Someone was like, "Oh, I'm using a power station with my BE." I was like, "You really don't need it," but that's my feeling. Daniel Zimmerman, thanks for the super chat. I didn't see a question, so if I missed it, let me know. Okay. He said, fan of your playing. What kind of stuff are you working on now? Daniel.
Me?
For you, Billy, yeah.
For me? Oh, for me?
For you.
Well, there's a new Cult album in the works. We've been digging away at that over the last year and a half. We're working with a great young English producer called Tom Dalgetty. And obviously with the circumstances of the last year or so, it's been a little challenging, but we're making some progress. And, the philosophy in the Cult camp really is about quality, not quantity. We don't just need to keep putting out records for the sake of it. So we want to really make sure that without being ridiculous, we want to, within a certain realistic time frame, make sure that the records that we put out are as good as they can be. So sometimes that takes a bit longer, and that's kind of where we're at. But we're well into the process of a new Cult album. And also I've done another, I have a little side project, such a terrible expression. But last year I was in England for a lot of the year, and I recorded an album with my old buddy Mike Peters, the singer from The Alarm. And that was just something I did for fun. We, with me and Mike, we just seemed to write very quickly, and we wanted to do a very simple, no frills rock record that didn't have. It was just spontaneous, light on its feet, and that's what we've done. So we have this Colour Sound. The band's called Colour Sound, and we did one album in 1988 when neither of us, he wasn't in The Alarm and I wasn't in the Cult. And then 20 years later, we've done another album, and so that's going to come out. That was just a lot of fun. So I've been quite a bit productive, given the last year or so of not doing any shows or anything. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I just did a bit of guitar on Jonesy's old band, The Professionals, that Jonesy doesn't play in anymore. I'm good buddies with Paul Cook, the drummer, and he just asked me to do a bit of guitar on a few tunes, so I did that this week. in LA at my mate's studio in Silver Lake, and that was pretty cool.
Cool.
Awesome.
Use one of my Friedman amps.
Great.
To good effect.
That's awesome. The Elusive, thanks for the super chat. Guys, great talk. Billy, how do you see the first 5 albums, Dreamtime to Ceremony? I love them all, yet they're so different from each other. I couldn't rank them. By the way, saw you guys in 01 and you killed. Rest in peace, Roseland Ball.
Roseland, yeah. Well, Roseland, we loved playing Roseland. We always like playing. There's certain venues that have like a magic to them, and it doesn't particularly matter. There's certain venues have different factors. Roseland was good. Any kind of ballroom, like the Palladium in LA, even though it's challenging sound-wise, when the stage and the audience are connected and it's sprung, there's like a connection there, because all those old ballrooms, the band used to play and people would come down and ballroom dance. The floors sprung. So the audience and the stage are at one. So it's different than, say, doing a theatre, where a theatre is constructed that the people on stage, the sound projects out. And there's usually what's called a proscenium, which is the arch above the stage. You don't have that in a ballroom. So they're very, very different to compare, Hammersmith Odeon in London, which is a theatre, to a Roseland Ballroom. In London we had the Hammersmith Palais, which was identical to Roseland Ballroom. Same thing, wooden floor. But to answer your question about albums, we always just kind of try to document where we're at. I mean, me and Ian are no different than anybody else. We're fans of music. We're two guys. One of the things about the Cult, I think, that's maybe worth mentioning is it's always been a collaborative, creative effort between me and Ian. And as you can imagine, like any kind of situation, there's pushing and pulling, and Ian wants to go a certain direction, I might resist, or I might want to go a certain direction. And that tension creatively, it's not like Ian writes Ian songs and Billy writes Billy songs and we record them as the Cult. There are no Ian songs or Billy songs. They're Ian and Billy songs together. And over the time, there's a bit of, creative, it's not always tension. I don't mean that in a bad way. That's what makes it good. You know what I mean? It's like that blend. And sometimes Ian will have more, we sort of respect each other to the extent that, I think there's a trust there, and I think that after this many years together and a few years apart, but that I think we trust each other and respect each other enough. So, and I think it's healthy to have creative tension. There's nothing worse than walking into a room and nobody's got any ideas. I'd rather have an argument about something creative than to have nothing, just the sound of crickets. Right, what we're going to do now?
Right, or they just agree to everything. Right.
Yeah, so we see things very differently. In a lot of ways, we're very alike. Our birthdays are 1 year and 2 days apart, so we're both Taurians. Our birthdays are both coming up very soon. We're very alike in a lot of ways and very different in a lot of ways. But so that as a background, we've sort of just followed our course. The first album, Dreamtime, was done. To be honest, somebody said, our manager at the time said, the promoters in Europe won't book you for shows unless you make an album, because we'd already done an EP and a single. They want you to have an album to promote, or else you can't really tour Europe properly. So we that was that album. And then the Love album was, we were beginning to find our feet. There was a slight period of panic prior to She Sells Sanctuary, where a lot of the other bands who were our peers were having hits and we weren't. We hadn't had a hit, and there was beginning to be this undercurrent. I remember of people were suggesting we do a cover version. Like people were like beginning to quietly go, have you guys thought about, anyway. So Sanctuary luckily changed all that. and that was kind of a watershed moment. And then, as I said earlier in this conversation, we were just then allowed, because we'd signed to Beggars Banquet, and they like still are a big independent label. Even though in America our albums appeared on Warner, Sire Warner, we signed with Seymour Stein. I might point out, but we were always, essentially, our contract was with Beggars Banquet in England. So we were given carte blanche to do what we wanted. Beggars Banquet have always been the kind of label where it's artist driven and music driven, you know. And so between that, it's just us exploring, you know, the difference. Ceremony was a bit of a hard one, because we wanted to do the album with Bob as a producer, because we got such a good rapport with him with Sonic Tempo, and he actually started working on the album, and we did one track with us with his pre-production, but unfortunately he was embroiled in a little album called the Black Album for Metallica, and that took a long time, and he just had to pull out of the Cult record. He said, I can't do both. You know, I mean, at that time, I mean, we would look at maybe 3 months to make an album-ish. The Metallica album, I think, took 13, maybe, I don't know, something like that. And so, you know, and the results were, you know, speak for themselves. You know, it's about the quality. It doesn't matter how long it takes to make it, as long as it's good. So for Ceremony, me and Ian were at a period where I think we were really quite diametrically opposed, and that album suffered because we ended up getting a producer who's actually still a friend of mine now, but he was caught in the middle. He was not our first choice, and he was caught in the middle, and Ian was in one extreme of what direction he wanted to take the Cult, and I at that time was like, we've just had our biggest selling album. We've just done the biggest. Why would we want to change our musical style now? You know what I mean? And that was one of the times, unfortunately, where I don't think it. But having said that, Ceremony, I think, has some of the best guitar sounds I've ever recorded on it. I don't think the songs are as fully realised and as good as perhaps they could have been. But I think that tone-wise, I think some of the guitar sounds are incredible. But I'd been on tour for nearly 2 years right before it. So I was at the full limit of my shredosity at that point.
You were fully warmed up.
I was prepared for that one.
We got a few more that I can't find in the actual chat to post on the video, but I'm just going to go through them. From Ronnie Walker, he says, Billy, what band would you love to play with besides the Cult? And what guitarist would you want to replace? What guitarist would you want to replace you if you left the band?
Oh man, that's a tough one. That's a bit of a morbid thought.
Who's going to take your job?
Who's going to jump in my warm slippers when I always said that I would love to have played for Iggy Pop, you know, for nothing. You know, he might have heard that and ring me up now, but I always, you know, we did some gigs with Iggy in '86. We didn't even really need to. We just wanted to. He toured Europe and we opened up for him because we could. And, you know, I mean, I'd love to be, that's one band. There's loads of bands, Mock the Hoople. Thin Lizzy, you know, I used to love Thin Lizzy when I was a kid. There's so many bands that I would love to have played in their music. And the thing about having these type of things, like, you know, if you asked me that question tomorrow, I'd come up with a bunch of different answers that may be even cooler. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But like right now at this moment in time, that's what flew into my head, like Iggy, you know. I think that's Iggy Pop stuff is all around good fun.
Right.
In terms of a replacement for me, that's a very, don't give Ian Asprey any ideas. I'm trying to think. There was a kid, I'll tell you who it is. There was a guy I used to play football with in Los Angeles who was Brazilian, and his name was Rafa. And he was a really good guitar player.
Rafael
I
Moreira.
would have suggested Rafa. If I was retiring, I would have got Rafa in to play my bits.
I know him so well.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I know him. I do work for him. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I off the top of my head, you know,
he was talking about soccer at the house in the hills.
Robbie's house.
Where did you Robbie? Yeah, Robbie Williams.
Robbie W's house. Yeah. And they're up on yeah. I thought Rafa was a really good guitar player. I mean, there's a million.
He's a great guitar player. Yeah. Interesting choice, but yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I didn't. Well, I'm not trying to avoid saying anything. I'm trying to think who would do a good job. I don't know. Rafa would be one.
There you go.
That's cool. Craig Sheehan gave us a super chat, but I didn't see a question. So thanks, Craig, for the super chat. And then Roger Dat said the crew tonight wants to know, what is your secret?
You'll find out tomorrow.
Okay. Exactly. You'll find out tomorrow. I don't even know what it is. I honest to God have no idea what it is. Okay. Blake Burris. Hey guys, love the episode with Bo Hill. Billy, did you ever play any shows with Cardiacs or have any interactions with Tim Smith?
Tim Smith. That's a familiar name. Can you give me a little more background on him, because I'm getting to that age where it's like a bit of a fog.
Yeah,
depending on what era of your life it came from, probably.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not sure. If Blake, if you can tell us more, we'll find out. Eric Johnson, and not the shredder Eric Johnson, or maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
Thanks to Billy for an amazing show at the Paramount in Seattle in 2019. It was a special night I'll never forget, and his live tone was on point. Awesome.
Oh, well, thank you. I do try. It's the least I can do,
I had been one of them.
Sound good.
And you do a very good job. S. Hodges, thanks for the super chat. I don't know if you gave us a question though, because I don't see it. Michael Torin, what's up? How are you, buddy? I wouldn't be me if I didn't ask Billy, can you talk about the rack gear you used in the 80s and 90s?
Okay, I had a huge rack in the 80s, and I had a Bradshaw rig, which everybody had, and I ended up. It's actually a true story. It's going to sound like one of those awful Netflix type stories. I put a lot of money into a Harley Davidson that it took so long to get this motorbike customized and made that by the time I got it delivered, I hated it. I hated the builder. So I immediately went to sell it. I had one photo session with it in some stupid biker magazine with me, my long blonde hair and like a waistcoat on, and did this photo shoot with this Harley, which was from a terrible era. It was like the AMF era when Harleys had the drive. Anyway, whatever. I don't want to get into motorbike talk, but it wasn't a good era for Harleys. But this bike looked amazing. Anyway, I flogged it to this French guy, and he gave me the money in cash. And I literally got in my car and drove over to the valley and gave it to Bradshaw and went, build me a rack. And I ended up using stuff. Bob helped me with it because Bob had worked with John Sykes. Psycho, and me and Sykes actually traded guitars. Funnily enough, we did a swapsy. We sent some people up to Blackpool. We traded Les Pauls, which of course subsequently that's gone in the mist of time now. That guitar went from me to Steve Jones and the Pistols, and is now owned by Mike Dimkich, who used to play in the Cult. And Mike's got that guitar, so that was originally John Sykes's. Anyway, Psycho used these Korg rack-mounted delays that sounded very warm and analog, and I remember that was an element in it all. And all that MIDI stuff was great for Bradshaw. It sounded pretty good when I listened back to the recordings. It was certainly on the Ceremony I think it was on Sonic Temple. I think I had it on Sonic Temple and Ceremony. Those were the two huge arena tours we did. So everything was in flight cases, you know, and everything was on a truck. And we had like, our flight cases had flight cases, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, we had roadies who had roadies, you know, it was great. You know, everybody had, it was just, it was excess all areas. It was great. And awesome. It was great. It worked really good. And then I didn't, so it was MIDI controlled, right? So we go down in 1991 and 92, we go down to do two big gigs down in Uruguay and Argentina. And they're quote unquote festivals, but really it was us supported by Steppenwolf. And the other one was, this is even weirder, Paul Simon supported by a Manchester Happy Monday type band called the Inspiral Carpets, like a Manchester band. And that was the festival, and we swapped two venues. And the interesting thing about that was Noel Gallagher from Oasis was the guitar tech for the Inspiral Carpets at those shows. Little known fact, true story. But what happened was we go on to play the gig in Uruguay, which was at the first ever stadium. It was an open air soccer stadium where the first ever World Cup, I think, was held in the 50s. And my Bradshaw rig freezes because the power's dirty. So basically, if you have you know, I didn't have a knowledge to take a variac down there or whatever. So basically, I did the whole show frozen in one setting, which was luckily a usable setting. But, you know, there can be issues with those rigs. But that's what I had. And all the pedals, I still use foot pedals because I like them, but they were in little drawers. Mm-hmm. Inside your rack. Your pedals were all like that, and then you had like a little controller. And if you paid enough, you'd get a roadie that was good enough to do your pedal changes for you. Then you could really show off, you know. So you wouldn't have to run back like I have to do nowadays. And am I going to make it back to get that damn delay off? And try and make it look like you're heroic. And then there was just a point where the cult kind of weren't as big as we once were. And I downsized everything. And then we started doing a lot of fly dates where it was just not practical to take amps. So suddenly I was like, well, shit, this stuff's got to be basically pretty generic for me to be able to, you know, it's just that point in your career where you have to make a decision, you know, do you want to come back off the tour and have a paycheck? Or do you want to come back off the tour no better off than when you left, other than the experience, because you spent it all in taking your gear? So I tried to find a way to get a great sound, but not use so much technology, you know, and that was the end of the Bradshaw era for me, you know, the rack, and just wasn't practical anymore.
Makes sense. Vibhas Patil, thanks for the super chat. Sonic Temple has one of the coolest guitar tones I've ever heard. What did you do to get that tone? And also, what was it like to work with Bob Rock? I know we've talked about working with Bob
touched on that a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, Bob was early in Bob's career. I mean, we've done 5 albums with Bob, so it wasn't like a one night stand. I mean, we've gone back to make very diverse sounding records with Bob. You know, he helped us finish off an album fairly recently that we kind of reached the dead end with. We did sort of something like a fan favorite album in 1994 with him, which was kind of like our post-grunge deconstruct album, which was called The Cult. And it had a black Hebridean, it's not a goat, it's a black Hebridean sheep with 4 horns on it. And that album, Bob did that album, it sounds nothing like Sonic Temple, not even close. And in the interim, he'd done Motley Crue, Metallica, and God knows what else. But so Bob, he has a great ability to kind of get into your head of what you're trying to pull off with the album. And he's the other great thing about working with Bob is you never ever walk in the studio without him having a plan. That's one of the greatest things about him. Over the decades I've known the guy, every time you walk into that space, something creative is going to get done. You know, there's no sitting around waiting for inspiration, twiddling your thumbs. You know, he kind of combines the perspiration, the planning, you know, with some inspiration, you know.
Yeah, that's great. Tom Haviland, thanks for the super chat. Just want to say I love the Phoenix. Simple song taken up to 11 with a wah pedal. Killer.
Well, thank you. I was particularly proud of that because when we did the album Love, as I'd mentioned, we ended up using Big Country's drummer, Mark Brzezicki, because our drummer we had to let go because he was incapacitated and was no longer really, just he got into drugs and blah, blah, blah. So we had to use Mark, and jamming with Mark, who was more of a technical kind of drummer. He was more of the Simon Phillips school of drumming, but he, you know, with a Big Country, there was a lot of tom-tom work, and we kind of simplified that. And then towards the end of pre-production, there was two riffs that I had. One was the Phoenix, and one was a song called Love. Became the song Love, and they weren't going to go on the album. They were just riffs I had. And in pre-production, literally before we went into the studio, me and Mark jammed these riffs out. Jamie joined in, and we ended up with these two songs that I believe changed the character of the Love album and I got to mess around with a wah-wah and do some stuff on both of those songs. I thought, bring the wah-wah back, you know, and it just was a really fun, creative time. And Mark's playing ability kept going, Mark, just play it a bit simpler, but, you know, do your thing. Just make it more stupid, you know, and that'll be good for the cult. And that's how that song came about, really. It is basically 4 chords repeated over and over again.
Awesome. We had a super chat from S. Hodges, but I can't find it. So I'm not sure what it says.
Oh, I think I see it.
He
wanted to know the concept behind the 24 FETs with a 24.75 scale NoHo Super Strat. Well, it's a Gibson scale 24 fret guitar. There's the concept. It works really well. I mean, it's just something we tried. It was Grover's initial idea.
Okay.
And it panned out.
Cool.
Yeah. Sometimes things aren't as thought about as people think.
More often than not.
Yeah, more often than not. It's like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, right. Sometimes it's just more often than not, it's dumb luck.
Yeah. Throw it against the wall, see if it sticks.
Yeah, a lot of the time it's that, you know. Combination of effects. Well, it varies. I mean, in an ideal world, I would always use a Roland JC 120 as part of my wall of amps, and that would be mic'd and panned because they have a very unique sound, and that's a big part of the sound of She Soul Sanctuary. There's 2 Boss delays going, one's the analog and one's the digital, and they both go again. One's a shorter thing and one's longer, and they're not set, they're set just by gut, and they just kind of, with the picking, there's an interaction. And then I believe there's some sort of flange on there, but over the last, how many years is it? 30 years? 35 years since I did it. It's gone through a few different, you know, itinerations. But essentially, that's it. And of course, one of the keys to getting it is to pick the part next to the bridge, so you get a different kind of attack on it. And you know, that's kind of all those elements together work. I mean, if you want to, and there's also always been a valve amp of some sort, generally a Marshall type amp, played in combination with the Roland, and they're blended together, and that's the essence of the sound right there. You know, the flanging is a bit optional. I mean, we had a lot of stuff going on when we did that record, but those were the essential pedals. I don't think there was a phaser. There might have been a phase 100, but set certainly not in that kind of jet stream type thing. Live, I mean, sometimes live, I mean, to be honest, nowadays, my sound engineer puts a couple of effects on it out front. It's a little bit of a secret that I kind of keep the tone on stage purer, and I let him add a couple of the effects out front, which he prefers because he can control them and make them more accurate to the room than me trying to hacking away on stage where it might sound good where I am, but I'm not sure it's translating out front. So of late, with Mr. Maguire, our out front guy from Detroit, who I'm sure Dave probably knows.
What's his whole name?
Steve Maguire. Do you know him?
I know him or not. I'm not sure.
Punk rocker. He was a punk rocker in Detroit. He was in a punk band. He's that old.
He's that old, huh?
He's that old. He was in a punk band in 1977, I think, in Detroit, which is saying something. Anyway, no, so he does that as well. But the essence of getting that Love album sound, really, Sanctuary and all of those tracks, you know, the essence of it is some sort of Roland with the chorus on, the inbuilt chorus of the amps. I've never found a chorus pedal that works the same.
Nah, man, the JC120 just sounds great.
There's nothing. A Roland do a chorus pedal now that I've got that's kind of like maybe kind of sorta, but it's still, you plug into it. Literally, you plug into a Roland JC120 or a JC77, and you have some sort of Marshall or Vox or something ballsy next to it. Add a bit of delay and dial in a little overdrive, and suddenly you go, that's the sound right there.
Huh.
That's 90% of it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Patrick Miller, thanks for the super chat. I saw Pete Thorne's video on the EL34s and could barely hear a difference. Is there a difference more discernible in person or really not that negligible? Are 12AX7 preamp tubes also very similar sonically?
Well, he did a video on 12AX7s too, so watch that. Well, to me, it's discernible. So, I mean, it's not like different set of speakers, but to me, it's discernible. But it's discernible in like the fringes of the notes and how the tone breaks up and how it the slight colors that it gives you. People hear it differently, but it's discernible to me. Very.
Don't listen on your phone.
You won't hear it on the phone at all.
Yeah, definitely don't listen.
It all sounds the same on the phone.
Right. Simon Hosford, regards from Oz. Love the big wide guitar sounds on the Cult records. Isn't a wet, dry, wet setup when there is equal volume dry in all three cabs, like with EVH, just essentially stereo with more dry?
Well, the difference is that the dry is unaffected. So there's nothing, it's the head directly to the cabinet. So you're not getting any weird interaction on the notes with the, like if you have delays going and stuff, you can get this weird sort of interaction. And if you do that kind of wet, dry, wet thing, it's just the center is just the pure amp.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, right? I mean,
it's a good thing. It's just a way to do it. One way.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, you know, you like to have an impure signal. That's that happenstance, dumb luck stuff. You know, as well as, you know, and there's always you can always go pure, you know. I actually had a funny story about Eddie Van Halen. When we were looking for producers, I went in, because we were through Warner Records, I met Ted Templeman, and I asked him how he got, this was the time when we ended up getting Bob for Sonic Temple, and we were doing the rounds because we were kind of being taken somewhat seriously in America as the next big thing. And met Ted Templeman. I remember he was explaining to me on that first Van Halen album what he did with Eddie's sound and how it sounds so large. And, you know, it was an interesting... I remember in his office in Warner's, meeting him and stuff. That was kind of interesting. Just quarter note stuff that tricks the ear into making the guitar appear, you know, which, you know, I cack-handedly have fallen into myself without using any science or mathematics whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But just that I learned it with Steve. There was another thing, because as you know, I'm pretty good pals with Steve Stevens, and I remember that tour we did with Billy Idol, and I kept going. Every time Steve Stevens stops playing, there's a little like happens afterwards. I'm like, he'll go blah, 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 and I'm like, and then I realised that's why his guitar sounds gigantic. Is he's got that little kind of note delay, ever so subtle, that just expands the sound out and gives it the width and the thing. I mean, I used to do it with the JC120. You know, you put one speaker out of one side of the PA and one speaker out the other. You know, and I mean, you know how those they get that chorus sound, Dave, probably, don't you? Isn't it something to do with delaying that's why one of the speakers always blows on a JC120, because the signal... Is there anything to do with that? Is that some kind of story I've picked up over the years?
I don't. That's a good question. I've never even heard that one. But yeah, but I mean, what
that's how they achieve that chorus in that particular amp, because it is very unique.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about with Steve, it was like he had a stereo echo on, and it would just trail after, you know, he would stop playing. And
yeah,
that was very, very common at the time, used by him, Eddie Van Halen, and a bunch of people.
All, you know. But it all just made one guitar sound infinitesimally wider.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because I'd never played arenas, and roadies were usually our mates.
Yeah.
It was all a big learning curve for me. Like I was trying to say, I kept my eyes and ears open and was like, you know, when I wasn't drinking and up to shenanigans, I was learning a lot, you know, from people around and just watching how it was done, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. 50 Mark II. Thanks for the super chat. I have a JCM 800 1960B 1986 with original V30s 4x12 sponge painted with white over original Tolex. I was told you owned it and used it on tour in the 90s. Full on baffling. Sharpie 8-ohm written on the plate. Purchased from Howie Huberman.
There could be some truth in that. There could be some truth in that one. I think, yeah, it sounds legit. I can't 100% confirm, of course, but that sounds, yeah. That's a familiar name. It's a lot. I'm at that age now where there's like a lot of names come out of the past, and you haven't heard them for like 33 years. Going through the filing cabinet in the back of the head. Now, that's a name that...
It's like, that name sounds familiar. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I went to high school with you. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm like, oof.
Okay, that was a long time ago.
And
all my cabinets with that cult stuff I said earlier when we were talking, I got all the fronts of... By the time we did Sonic Temple, when we went on tour, I had the fronts changed to look like vintage cabinets and the small logo put on them. They're all basically 1986 era Marshall 4x12s with whatever speakers they came in. And then I just changed the fronts on them. I got them done in, I think it was a place called Axe Victim Audio in LA. And they changed all the fronts to look vintage. Yeah, one time, I believe, when the cult broke up the first time, or we went on hiatus or whatever it was called, I had a bit of a sale at my lockup, and I sold stuff like Duff McKagan bought a cabinet and Mike Dimkich. And I realized I used to have 4x12s in the pit of the arena so I could get feedback at the front of the stage, and they were powered off 200-watt solid-state power amps off the back line, which was 6 4x12s all plugged in, all going. So that was 8. And then somehow I ended up with 13. I remember at the time, I went down, I've got 13 4x12s. I don't really know what I'm going to do with all this.
That's
know,
awesome.
And then some of it, Jonesy took some of it out on that Pistols tour when they reformed in 96, I believe it was, or 97. Jonesy bought some stuff off me and painted a big cross of St. George on them, and Duff got one. I kept some, though. I kept some gear from that era.
So I think I pronounced it's Miko. Is that how you would say that?
Miko?
Or Miko?
Well, I thought I said
Miko. I don't know.
Miko. Yeah. Well, however, thanks for the super chat and thanks for telling us. Let's see. It's this. So Miko Thompson, thank you. It was a Super Tremolo Plexi 100 watt. That was the amp that I showed you before. That he says that he.
That was a nice amp. You shouldn't have got rid of that.
No, I know. Believe me. Did Bob Rock tell you about the 1959 Les Paul flame top that I sold him for 10 grand?
Oh,
he probably didn't. He didn't tell you about that one.
No.
No.
Who is this?
He didn't tell you about that story. No. Yeah. As I said, that's probably my biggest error. I never particularly liked the guitar, but it was just at that point before Slash turned everything. Everybody wanted to get those guitars. Basically Slash started using them. GNR blew up huge, and all of a sudden everybody wants to stop playing them pointed sticks that look like a broomstick, and they want to get, and I had this guitar I'd bought in London, and it's in there's a few live videos, and I was on TV right around the Electric tour, and it was a 59, and it had been re-lacquered. I bought it knowing it had been re-lacquered, but it was all original, and I just didn't get along with it, and I sold it to Bob. I also sold
for 10 grand
Falcon, which ended up on Nothing Else Matters with a Metallica. If you know that big, that's one of my Falcons. And what else did Bob get off us? Oh, we got the white. I had a 1961p bass that we used. That I ended up buying, and then Jamie used it a lot, and but he didn't like the neck, so in the end he ended up using a Peabody with a jazz neck because he had little hands. But Bob got that 61p bass, which was like white. That was a killer bass. Bob still got it. He gets rid of nothing, I'm telling you.
Nope.
It's all in his possession. He's got all that stuff.
So Miko, thanks for the super chat. This is for you, Dave. Have you built the Ken Fisher Trainwreck pedal schematic that I sent you?
No, I haven't. I you know what? I barely have time to breathe these days. I mean, I'm so busy. It's not even funny. It's just like there's people getting mad, amps stacked to the ceiling. It's just. Well, actually, no one's getting mad yet, but they will if I don't finish them.
Greg G finally bought a Billy Duffy Falcon last year at the young age of 22, and I love it. Any updates on a Billy Duffy signature Les Paul or Black Falcon reissue?
Oh, well, welcome. Oh, good. Welcome to the club. I'm not sure I'd be open to it. When we did the reissue, we only made like 40 or 50 Black Falcons because I wanted it to be properly a limited edition. And people are like, oh, yeah, we can get one. Well, you can't because there was only that many made. But, maybe we'll talk to Gretsch. There's been a lot of talk that over the years, there's been talk with Gibson about doing a signature Les Paul, but it's just never come together. The circumstances, there's always been some reason why and wherefore it's never happened. There's nothing particularly unique or fancy about any of the Les Pauls I've ever used. They're not, I generally prefer Les Paul customs. I have a couple of gold tops that I like, but I mean, if I had to pick one guitar that I would use, it'd be a you know, a Les Paul custom that didn't weigh 400 pounds, that you know, just that's to me that's my favorite Les Paul, and I know many other people would disagree with me, but there's nothing particularly fancy about what I would do, you know, with a Les Paul. And as regards, you know, as I said, the next thing hopefully we're going to pull together from Gretsch is this new Falcon Junior, which is, that's the new little toy that's coming. So keep an eye on my billyduffy.com, and we'll be revealing pictures. And I'm definitely going to do that in black.
Cool.
Awesome. Jordan Brooks, love the show, love the cult. Dave, I got a JJ Jr. from Sweetwater. I was curious about the clean channel and if the three-way switch was just adjusting mids or if it's giving 3 flavors of an AC30.
It's a simple, it's very simple. It's a 3-way bright switch across the volume pot. All the clean channel is a gain stage into the power amp. So there's nothing there. So it just changes the bright frequency.
Okay.
Nothing fancy.
JTP773, thanks for the super chat. Billy, will you please teach the younger guitar players what proper guitar height is?
Yeah, I think what happened was that, you know, enough people have grown up now sitting on their laptop and even playing guitar sat down all the time, that when they stand up, they want the same relationship between their chin and the guitar as when they were sat down. But, you know, I don't want to sound old, you know, I don't know. I just found it was always, you know, more heroic to have the guitar lower. But, you know, it's like everything, man. You know, it comes around, long hair, short hair, flares, skinny jeans. You know, stick around long enough, you know, it comes
It'll
around.
Change.
But I do notice though, as guitar players age, their choice of guitar becomes a little more friendly, lighter, and perhaps they start getting a bit thick around the middle. The guitar has to rise up with the, you know, because I don't think there might be something in the way, you know. You've got to make sure you're still getting in some sort of jeans that you could get in when you were 25.
That's true.
You know, otherwise there's something in the way.
Yep. You got to wear it a little higher.
It's funny though when you try, like my guitar tech, he has to have a special thing because he can't play the guitar as low as I have it, and he's a far better guitar player than I am. But he can't. He can't play. He has to have a special thing when he works on my guitars, and then he hands it to me. I'm like, "You've done the thing," and it's up here, and then it drops down. And but one of the things I noticed with me is that I changed. Like as I got a bit older, I'm left-footed, but I'm right-handed. So I'm kind of do a bit of both. Like I throw left-handed, but I write right-handed, and I play guitar right-handed. But I kick a football left. I'm a bit mixed up like that, but so I played a wah-wah with my left foot. So that gives you kind of a nice heroic stance to swing the guitar, so you can get up the neck. And I look back in the 80s when I was playing gigs, if I see videos, and I'm actually playing the wah-wah right-footed, and that generally puts the guitar on your right thigh and almost round to the side. It's just I can do both. But out of the last sort of 10 years, I've mostly just done the wah-wah with my left foot. And the guitar just sits in a good, you know. To keep playing your guitar low, though, as you get older, it does take a bit of effort. Like, you've really got to mean it to get up the neck, you know?
Yeah, I can imagine.
You got to attack it and move it a bit.
Right.
You know, there's a bit of choreography required.
Yep. S. Hodges, thanks for the super chat. I think you've sent us a few of them. I really appreciate it. And I think the question for Dave was, Dave, can you get a custom shop order? I'm not sure if that's, I guess, for the guitars. And right now, I think the answer is no, right?
Custom shop guitars or amps? Amps, yes. Although at this point in time, Who knows how long that's going to take? Guitars right this minute, no. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of new challenges in making things and doing stuff at post or ending of
Post the
COVID.
thing we're not going to mention.
Yeah. You know, there's a whole
Because we're
thing,
sick
man.
of hearing about it.
Our wood prices have almost tripled. To
Really?
make cabinets, tripled. So you got to remember. So that it's made out of Baltic birch. So that's a 4x4 sheet, not a 4x8 sheet. So it used to cost something like $38 a sheet or something. And now I think it's up around the 70 mark or even higher. It's insane.
Is it because of shipping
And everything is that way. A little processor chip that used to cost $3 now is $14. There's mark my words, everyone. You're going to see an alarming price increases over the course of the next year on
everything.
On everything. Your coffee makers, everything.
Everything.
Everything across the board. Refrigerator, whatever. You're going to see it. It's starting to happen now.
Yeah, you heard it first on Song Talk. There's going to be a thing called inflation.
Yes, massive.
You heard it here first. Mark my words. You will be hearing the word inflation a lot over the next 3 years. That's coming down the pipe because of what Dave just said.
Yeah,
a lot of reasons for it, but it's coming.
It's interesting. Lead times on things that I have to order and things too. It used to be, that's it'll be 2 months or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's now 6 or 7 months lead time on parts.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
crazy. I want to get through these because I want to be respectful of your time.
Really?
Are you good on time?
Yeah. Of course, I'm often guilty of when being asked about guitar players, and I don't sometimes mention the screamingly obvious guitar players like Jimmy Page, like Angus Young. Of course, they influenced me. Absolutely. Malcolm Young and Angus together. I had the great fortune to see them play in Manchester at the Free Trade Hall, I think in 1977.
Oh, wow.
And the part of the show was the bit where Angus and Bon would get off the stage and they'd go out the side of the theatre and coming back and go down the stalls. So you're at a venue that holds about 2,000, with a small balcony and, not the biggest venue, but not little. And I remember going by, and then, of course, Angus is on his shoulders, right? So everybody's trying to hit the guitar. And I remember hitting his guitar once. So I would have been 77, I would have been 16. And I saw that show. That was pretty amazing. And to be part of that. Yeah, Jimmy Page was always like, because of the tunings and stuff, it was always a bit otherworldly to me. I remember there was a kid in my neighborhood in South Manchester who could play Black Dog. And I used to think of him as somewhat like another outer space being, because how on earth could he, I was struggling, I was like trying to get my head around Thin Lizzy and the New York Dolls and Lynyrd Skynyrd, and, I could just about get my brain around, Bad Company maybe, but then Page with his tunings and all that weirdness, it just, and then the time change on, I remember, and this kid used to work in a guitar store. That was it. And I'd go, and obviously when you're young in Manchester and you've got nothing else to do and no money, you go to guitar stores and see what you might be able to steal or at least look at, and go and stare at a real Gibson guitar for like an hour because there's nothing else to do. And he worked in this guitar shop, I think called A1 Music, and he could play Black Dog, and he also could play Now I'm Here by Queen, which subsequently I have learnt them both. Now I'm nearly old enough for a bus pass, but at that time watching somebody play that kind of music, I was astonished. And that even wasn't into any of the, like, the first Zeppelin album I got was Houses of the Holy, and my favorite Zeppelin song still to this day is Dancing Days. And that's got that B-bender thing. And, you know, it's just got, there's something about that song and Plant's vocals and the general swagger. And there's just, you know, I just love that. I don't know, it's my favorite. I know it's probably not a lot of people's favorite Zeppelin song, but it's mine. You know, but he was otherworldly. I mean, Jimi Hendrix, when I was really young, they used to sell in my local newspaper shop vinyl on the stand, and it was generally, they would make cheap copies of chart records. What it was session musicians would be paid to go and record current hits, and they press them and get them out really cheap and really quick. So you could buy 6 or 7 songs off the charts for like no money, done by session players and singers. And in amongst that, with these weird albums, like there was a Jimi Hendrix live album, and like, bear in mind, you're talking about 13 years of age in South Manchester in like a little newsagent shop. And there was a Bill Haley album. I remember this stuff, it's like imprinted in my mind. And I remember playing listening to the Hendrix record. It was a live album, one of the million dodgy bootlegs of his or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that was amazing, you know, playing with that. I mean, I cannot imagine being in the same room watching Jimi Hendrix play, what effect that must have had on all those British guitar players like Page and Clapton and Beck and that, seeing him do his thing.
Right.
You know, and it must have been like many things, including horrifying, because he was on just another level. And you know, I never really talk about that stuff. That was part of my growing up, but I could never, I never. And then what happened was, when I just about got competent on the guitar, punk happened. So that kind of made anybody my age, you know, in 1976, 77, you know, you made a choice really. You know, am I going to get into punk, or am I going to keep the long hair and, you know, stay wearing flares? I mean, it's just, you know, there was a big divide took place. Even in my high school band, you know, we split down the middle. You know, the guys wanted to still play Neil Young songs and Fleetwood Mac. And, you know, I was off, you know, trying to work out how to play Search and Destroy and, you know, Jet Boy by the New York Dolls. And that was that.
Awesome. Michael Torrens got another super chat. Thanks, Michael. Billy, you at times are seen playing a Black Falcon. Was this ever released as a signature guitar? I know we just talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, it was. In short answer, yes, it was. It was just a limited edition run. It was 40 or 50 guitars, and it was just a kind of a little thing you do just to kind of stimulate. It looks great in black. I kind of prefer it in black, really.
Yeah, I mean, either way, that's great.
I'll take either.
Yeah.
yeah.
I've always wanted a white Falcon, though.
Yeah, me too.
That or the old Gretsch Duojet Sparkle Top. Always kind of had.
Well, that's one of their classics.
Yeah,
you know that. I mean, Gretsch have had some great. Yeah, they've made some fantastic guitars. You know, Gretsch. When I was in England in the 80s, you know, that was very early on in this conversation. We talked about that. And, you know, I used to hang around a vintage guitar shop in London in Earl's Court. And it was one of the first places where they were curating old guitars. And I remember they had you know, the preeminent Gretsch at the time, I remember, was the 6120, which was a model that everybody loved. And I remember seeing one of those there, and you know, they've made some great guitars. Like I say, the Silver Sparkle Jet's always a classic, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Totally.
I remember saying Joe Perry with one.
Yeah, well, Joe Perry with anything.
Yeah.
Joe Perry could play any guitar and make it look cool, because Joe Perry, when he had the Malin streak in his hair,
yeah,
and was high as a kite, was
Yeah.
the coolest person in the world of rock ever.
Yeah.
I know he was probably
I
trying
would
to be Johnny
agree.
Thunders, but when I used to see Joe Perry and luckily I got to know him, and we've toured with him a bunch, and with Aerosmith, and I had the pleasure of getting to know all of them, and very kind and generous people. But it was funny when I was a kid, Joe Perry, that era when Tyler used to wear the black and the stripy like jester kind of outfit, and Joe Perry was, and it was just incredible watching that from like where I was at in England, thinking like, what, these guys are just amazing. What did Perry have? Was it an upside down Strat with a Telecaster neck?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
But
Right.
played right-handed.
Yes.
Right. Yep.
What did he do? Come on, you've got loads of guitars behind you. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it was a left-handed. It was a left-handed body played right-handed
played
with a telly neck.
right-handed, so it was upside down.
Yeah, so it was a left-handed guitar, I think, with a left-handed telly neck, or was the telly neck straight?
The telly neck
I
was
don't
straight.
remember. I have to look again.
I think the telly neck was a righty neck
On a
with
lefty body.
On a lefty body.
Yeah.
You just it don't get any cooler. Joe Perry, the coolest guy ever.
Yeah, and great player too.
Very well. So's Brad Whitford. That was another thing I learned.
Oh yeah,
that when Brad gets to do his solo, Brad's got some chops. Or he had. I mean, we haven't played with them for several years, but I remember. I mean, I used to go and watch him every night, and occasionally they dig out a real oldie, when in between doing their, contemporary hits and that, and then they'd go deep, and they'd like Rats in the Cellar had come out or something, or they'd do something odd and it was just great to watch him,
Yeah, great band. Epic show tonight, guys. Billy's a great guest and great player. Thank you. And going through all the super chats. Simon Hosford, thanks for the super chat. I understand the dry is pure straight from the amp and is desirable. Why not then use 100% wet in the sides to give the front of the house? Thanks, guys.
Well, yes, that's another way of doing it, and it is done that way. But here's the thing: if you have 3 4x12 cabinets, and even if you turn all the effects off, you got 3 4x12 cabinets going. It's automatically big. It's just a bigger rock tone, bigger thing.
I mean, my general experience with sound guys is they want as much control over the sound you're giving them off stage as possible. So they would always want the dry one because
be that good or bad.
Yeah, well, be that good or bad if you trust the guy. Exactly. Now,
that could be a train wreck too.
Well, indeed, but if you trust the guy, he can then accommodate using his delays with the PA and make it work as part of the ensemble.
Mm-hmm.
And then your effects, your echo on stage really is for my ears and to get me inspired, to get me to perform well and feel good. I always will have 2 4x12s going, and they're usually split apart. So basically it's like a set of headphones coming behind me. And then I'll put usually whatever little combo I'm using goes in the middle. And a lot of people are like, oh man, you get an amazing sound. You've got a Vox AC30. What? I'm like, no, there's 2 amps hidden behind the 4x12s. I just don't have them on stage. So there's a school of thought where in recording, I use one 4x12 or one 2x12 or whatever works to sound. But live, I just like the 2 cabinets. I like the head running 2 cabinets. It just gets me excited on stage.
That's cool. Timothy Cohen, thanks for the super chat. When did
Oh, okay.
When you did electric, you rented 10 Marshalls, chose the best two to
Yeah.
record on the album. Do you remember what models the amps were? JMPs, JCMs, stock?
I honestly can't remember. I'd love to be able to say I remember. I do know that I like what's the one that is I don't know whether I've owned one. The JMP. That's the one where they went to the big logo, but they still had the cutout at and they have the corner protectors.
Yeah.
It was kind of late 70s into the early 80s. In my opinion, such as it is, I think that's a really good Marshall. For a guy like me, if I was to go for a stock off-the-shelf Marshall, I believe that era was a really good era for amps. But I can't remember what we used. I do remember, that I was just trying to illustrate the extent that which sound engineers will go to. Another thing Andy Wallace did with the Marshalls that I don't remember what they were, there was a long time spent backing off the gain, just to the point where I was beginning to panic and lose confidence because I wouldn't have any sustain. But in turning down the saturation, it actually expanded out the sound of the guitar. It got bigger. And that's the antithesis of what I call the guitar center tone, which is all that front end sizzle saturation. There's no real work being done by the amp. There's no real power being done. It's all kind of fake. And I remember that and a long time being spent once we'd isolated the two best amps, backing off the gain till we got, the closest. I mean, there was absolutely no mystery. I mean, I'll tell anybody who asks me, Rick Rubin had Highway to Hell on CD. And anytime Andy Wallace had a question about how to make anything sound, he just pointed to that. And went, how should the cymbals? Should the guitar be? And that's, I mean, we had a very limited. Remember, Rick was only supposed to cut one song and mix the whole album. And we kind of created a lot of panic and discontent back in London by calling up the management going, so got something to tell you. Like we were going to remix the album. Well, we've actually recorded half of it again. And it's very different sounding and they all came over on a plane. And,
really?
And to the credit to Martin Mills, who's the guy that owns Beggar's Banquet, he came, and our managers at the time, Ian Grant and Alan Edwards, they flew out and they were like, oh wow. They weren't like, what are you doing? You're insane. They all got behind it, and it was a really good it was a good experience,
That's great. Timothy Cohen, another super chat. Thank you. How did you hook up with Harry Colby? What did you like about his mods? Does Steve Jones have those amps? And how do your Freemans differ? More awesome?
Okay, I can answer all of that. Harry Colby was a friend of when we got a new American manager called Howard Kaufman, who's sadly passed away. He had an assistant and a Japanese girl, and she knew Harry Colby from New York. It was just a happenstance, and she overheard me saying something about me not liking the sound of my amps, or I'm not digging these. And she said, oh, my friend Harry. And that's literally how stupid and dumb luck that was. She just happened to know him from New York, and we sent the amps off and they came back better. And his mods, he just made the amps have more bottom end, more percussive sound. And he did a gain thing. They used to saturate a little bit more, but in a good way. Steve Jones doesn't have those amps because I got them back off him. And I only own one of them now. One of them blew up and was just whatever. And then I sold a couple recently, and I've got one. And well, what I will say, without wanting to blow Dave Friedman's head any bigger, is that I use his amps now. I am a paying customer, I might add. Right, Dave?
You are a paying customer, yes.
Of Dave's amps. I would say Without, and not because he's here, I use them because they're great. Simple as that. I've not found a better sounding. How do I want to phrase this? If you imagine the best quote unquote Marshall sound you ever heard, that's what a Friedman can give you.
Mm-hmm.
That's in my opinion.
I agree with you. Patrick Miller, thanks for the super chat. Did the new JC 120s sound as good as the vintage ones?
Okay. Well, generally the vintage ones are so battered now that it's hard to tell because their speakers take a hell of a beating from the chorus effects and the bottom end of that. So I would say one thing I can tell you is that the new ones, the chorus is adjustable. So you have the classic setting on and then it's adjustable, which is nice because you can back it off and make it a bit more subtle, and the distortion is actually not terrible, whereas on the old ones it was just it was just awful.
It was unusable.
So there's a few things about the new ones I like. I've never really done a back-to-back head-to-head old one because every time I've seen an old one they're just kind of destroyed. So I couldn't honestly give you an opinion. I mean, they're solid state amps, so there's a limit to how much the factors inside them can change.
Right, that's true. Pete Thorne, what's up, Pete? Thanks for your question. I saw GNR open for the Cult in '87 or so. No one knew who GNR were yet. I did, but They were just about to explode. Killer show.
They were great. Nobody had heard of them. And as I said, Ian turned me onto them and they were about to go. They did their first tour with us. That was the first time they'd been quote unquote on tour. They'd obviously done gigs and but get on a tour bus and go out for a while. And, they were the real deal. Then, they were the authentic real deal for what they did, it was, and they lived it, you know what I mean? It was a lot of fun on tour. They lived, they did what they said they did on the box, there was no fakery there.
That's great. I'm looking to see if there's any more questions. Did you see any, Dave?
I'm looking to right now. Now I think that's about it. I think.
Oh crap! There's a Black Falcon release. I can hear my money leaving my pocket.
Well, not exactly what I do. They sort of.
Yeah.
There's one question here. Please ask Billy about his Gibson Les Paul Custom that almost was. He showed a pic of it on his Facebook account 4 to 5 years ago.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. As I say, I've been close with Gibson on a couple of occasions. I have a Les Paul Custom that's now my number one, a black one, that was one period where they made, they wanted to do a signature model. Because this is the thing, on the front of Sonic Temple, the guitar is a black Les Paul Custom. Mm-hmm. And I can tell it's not mine because I think I borrowed it for the photo shoot because mine was with the guitar maker having the front taken off and finished like a Mick Ronson thing. I had like, let's make a guitar like Mick Ronson's, just as a mad idea, right? And I remember, I think I borrowed that guitar, and so Gibson were like, well, it's a black one on the front of Sonic Temple. I'm like, yes, but every gig and every video, if you look at Firewoman or all of the videos, I mostly use the wood-fronted ones, because the photo shoot happened before the tour. Anyway, but I mean, Gibson, we've been close. I'd love to be able to do one. That we did a wood-fronted one. There's nothing really, honestly, there's nothing really that unique about the way I did it. It's just a wood front with I have certain kinds. I like the H nickel hardware. Pickups are I've been using the 498T pickup from Gibson, which I quite like. There are others, but there's nothing particularly, unique or special about it, other than that no pickup covers, no pick guard, all the stuff I learned by looking at Thin Lizzy and was like, nobody uses a pick guard, nobody has pickup covers on, and better take them off. I didn't know why you took them off. You just took them off because they look cool.
It looked cool, exactly.
Yeah, less is always more.
Let's make this the last question. Any favorite speakers?
Just ones that work.
I like that.
No, I don't have a particular model. Generally Celestians, I would think. Anything in the Celestian family. I've definitely used unfashionable Celestian speakers and got decent sounds out of them, as well as using the legendary, 25 watt, 30 watt. I just use a bit of, recording wise, and it's just kind of preference too. But Celestian's definitely a good way to. You can't go wrong.
Yeah,
cool. Well, Billy, I can't thank you enough for your time being on the show. You're fantastic.
Good
not only
chat.
an amazing musician and artist, but you're also a great human. So thanks for being on the show.
I'm working on it. All right, guys. Well, pleasure chatting.
Yeah, hang on one second while we say goodbye, if you don't mind.
All
Just
right.
one more minute.
Sure.
Our next show is on May 8th with Dan Gower. And then on May 21st is Tom Bukovac. Confirming that with Tom, but I think that's when it is. Then we'll have our 100th show, and we'll announce who that big guest will be. I'm also in talks with Dweezil Zappa, Mark Farner. If you guys know Mark Farner from Grand Funk Railroad, he's going to be on the show.
Wow.
Greg Fiddleman, Wayne Kramer, and also the guys from Two Notes. So we've got a lot of great stuff coming up, guys. All right. So everybody have a great weekend. Dave, have a good weekend.
Everyone.
Billy,
See you guys.
Hang on one second, Billy. We're just going to sign off and say goodbye.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Okay, Kale Joe wants to know, what is that amp behind me? That is a modded, right there. That's a modded Marshall 1987 reissue
That I did.
That Dave modded for me. Okay.
Stock kind of mod. So,
yep. All right, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Take care.